Hello everybody, 6-Speed Dakota here, and it's the weekend after the Easter long weekend, and yeah, I have my ATVs out down at my cabin, and I noticed something peculiar when I got there, and that is, I don't know if you can see it right there, but right there, yeah, that's grease in the inside of the wheel. If you look closely here, you can see all that nice, oh, come on focus, all that nice grease right there. So we have a blown wheel seal. So we're unfortunately going to have to fix it. That side doesn't look too bad, but since we're doing the one side, seals are like $2 each, so may as well replace it. Now you're going to need a bunch of supplies, and that is... Alright, so here's some stuff you're going to need for this job. You're going to need a tub of wheel bearing grease. You are going to need a couple of oil seals. They call them oil seals, but they're wheel seals, grease seals. And if you don't have a tabbed lock washer like this guy here, you're going to need a cotter pin for this job. Another thing, tools you're going to need, small hammer, some pliers maybe to get the cotter pin undone if you have one. And if you can't, if you got a big wheel nut like I got and you can't get it off with channel lock pliers, you're going to need a big socket like that. Not really a big deal, just standard set of hand tools. And you're going to need a compressed air gun because it'll take forever if you let the stuff air dry. So you're going to need some kind of solvent, any kind of lacquer thinner, Varsol more preferable. And I very highly recommend that you use brake and parts cleaner because it's extremely volatile and it evaporates very quickly. So that's about it. Let's get to work. Okay, so your first step is that you're going to want to get your trailer as unloaded as possible. You know, if you got a boat on a trailer, well, that's not really possible to get it unloaded, then don't really worry about it. It's just easier if it is. So you're going to want to take the weight off your leg jack. You see how wobbly these stupid things are? You don't want it supported on your leg jack. So right now I got the front end supported on a jack stand, and you're going to want the trailer to be a slightly forward tilt to keep the weight on that jack stand. Then all you want to do is you're going to want to jack up your wheel and spin it a couple times, make sure it spins nice and smoothly, which it does. Then what you're going to want to do is you want to take it from either end. I can't really do this while holding the camera, but you're going to grab it by the top and one hand on the bottom, and you're going to rock it back and forth to make sure that there's no play in the wheel bearings. It shouldn't rock at all, and when I do that I can feel a little bit of play. So chances are maybe the wheel bearing needs a bit of an adjustment, and that little bit of looseness is what blew the grease seal out. The other thing that could blow it out is if the bearing is starting to fail in there. That could cause the wheel seal to blow, or excessive loading and excessive speed on the highway could also cause the seal to fail. Now, as you can tell, my trailer isn't exactly impeccable quality here, so you know I'm not really surprised I got to fix this. But so now you got it jacked up and the wheel off. The first step is you're going to remove the wheel. Okay, so if you're doing this on a trailer without a brake or anything like that, you'll just be left with this little hub. Now, if you're doing this on your two-wheel drive front hubs with serviceable taper bearings like these, well, then you're going to have to remove the caliper off of that and possibly the caliper mounting bracket. But if you're lucky like me, all you'll have to do is just remove this hub here, which makes it very easy. So, standard set of hand tools is what you're going to need besides your way to get your wheel off, and it's also very, very preferable if you could have an air compressor for blowing the solvent out of the bearings, but we'll get to that in a minute. So you're going to need a flat blade screwdriver, a couple sets of pliers, a good set of pliers for the most part, and some channel lock pliers, which I don't have on me right now. I'll have to go grab that in a second. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your screwdriver. So now, take your flat blade screwdriver and your little hammer here. You're going to stick the flat blade screwdriver in behind this little dust cap here, and you're just going to Give it a couple of love taps and pry outwards. And then just take your screwdriver, just kind of start prying around the circle here until this guy pops out. Oh, might take a little bit of love to get off, but there we go. Sometimes if you take the screwdriver, put it in the groove, and kind of give it the twisting motion, it'll also help pop it off. It doesn't really help that there's a bearing in the or the no brake holding it on there. So I'll get this off, and we'll be back in just a second. Okay, so once you get your cap off, and this is all cleaned up, you notice that this guy here is kind of got these slots cut in it. This is called a castellated lock nut. And what this is designed to do is this is designed to hold a cotter pin that goes through there like that. This one doesn't have a cotter pin. It's got a special style of lock washer. So I probably won't have to replace that. But if you got a pin that goes through there that's all bent over, you're going to have to replace that pin. And they're quite cheap. So don't skimp out. That's very, very important. But this guy's got a little tabbed lock washer here. So what we're going to do, so I'm just going to try to tap that guy out. Oh, there we go. So if I get in closer here, on zoom here, that little tab right there, I just folded down so I can now spin that nut off by hand. So basically, here's where your good set of channel locks comes in. Okay, well, since my pair of channel lock pliers here really won't go big enough to get on there, I've improvised and used this massive socket. So, just basically loosen this hub nut off. It's a bit of a pain, but there we go. And there's the nut. So clean that guy off. Oh dear. Actually turns out that these tabs here that I folded back are actually part of the spindle itself, which is a really interesting design. I haven't seen that one before. So now you should just be able to take your hub and kind of work it a little bit. Oh, maybe not. Oh, it looks like it's got threading in it, but that's just because of the nut. So here's this lock washer here. Now this is in decent shape. You probably don't have to reuse it. But there's the two tabs right there you're looking at. And what that is that there actually sits in one of the grooves of this lock nut here and holds it in place. This is very important because that nut doesn't get installed very tight. So then you might have a thrust washer on here, which I believe this guy, that lock washer also serves as a thrust washer. Oh, I lied. It does have one on here. So it's very important that you have a thrust washer on here. This is made of hardened steel, and it's designed to basically prevent the nut from riding against the surface of the bearing in here. This is very, very important. And usually they come with a flat in it like that. That sits on this flat right here in the spindle here. So now that we got all these out, all you have to do is just grab it and just give it a little bit of a pull, and it slides right off the shaft just like that. So here's the outer bearing, which is usually smaller than the inner bearing. So make sure you keep it separate. Sometimes on certain vehicles these can be the same size, which in this case I think it actually is. I haven't ever... Yeah, it actually is. So if you see this... Oops. See this? This outer bearing here matches the inner bearing. size. So be absolutely sure to keep these two apart. Oops. Be absolutely sure to keep this guy apart, because if you put inside here is a steel ring called a race, or the outer race, and these rollers here on this bearing, they actually develop a special wear pattern with their own race. So if you mix them up, you could end up with a bearing failure, and that would be very, very bad. So now we're going to tap the seal out of the back. Okay, so I got the bulk of the grease out of the hub. That's another thing you want to do, is clean all the grease out from inside this inner bit here, because it's all probably kind of bad. So your wheel bearing, which basically sits like that in there on the other side, has basically two main pieces to it. This inner piece here is called the race. This is hardened steel, and it's designed for wear resistance and long life. This little piece here is just cast carbon steel, mild steel, and it's very soft. It's called the cage, and all it's doing is holding these little rollers in. So to get the wheel bearing out of the other side, because it's being held in there obviously by the wheel seal, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a drift punch, and you're going to want to hit it, this bearing right here on the race. If you hit it on the cage and damage the cage, you're going to have to replace the bearing. Okay, so what I've done is I've sat the hub inside the wheel, just like that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this drift punch. I'm just going to hold it right there. You'll see where I'm holding it. On the race of the bearing. That is absolutely critical that it's on the race of the bearing. Apologize for my head being in the way if it is. Just give it a couple good hits. Don't need to kill it. And that's all she wrote. There it is. The hub's completely empty now. We'll pull our wheel away. And there's our outer bearing and the seal. So remember, once again, keep the outer bearing and everything else separate. That is very, very important. So here's the grease seal here. And this is what's causing me all those problems. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to take a bucket or some kind of cleaning device, whatever. If you have a solvent tank, use it. This is, you can use bar sol, lacquer thinner, anything really. I also recommend having a good set of nitrile gloves for this part. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a brush, my brother's toothbrush. Nah, just kidding. We're going to take a toothbrush or a wire brush. Don't use a wire brush, or you might damage the rollers, which are machine flat surfaces. So just basically a soft bristle brush. Once again, if you have a solvent tank or something like that, use that instead. It's much, much better. But basically what you want to do, get your bearing in there, and just basically scrub everything on it. Get in here on the rollers, kind of thing. And you know what, this is not a clean job. So if you're afraid of getting dirty, now either man up or don't do this job. So basically what you want to do is you want to clean everything in here. You want to get in between the race and the cage here. You want to get all the old grease out of there. And then the next step is we're going to take some brake and parts cleaner, and we're going to get in there and clean that out with some brake and parts cleaner as well. But it's done a pretty good job. As you see, the bearing spins fairly nicely. So once again, just clean this bad boy out a little bit, and then take some clean paper towel and wrap the bearing up in it. And this will pull out any of the old solvent. Now while you're at it, I recommend cleaning the grease seal up, even though it's old and blown out. If you have to take it to the parts store like me, because I shot the stuff you need section after I was finished all of this. You may want to give it to them to see if they can find any numbers on it, and so they can measure it without getting all dirty. So, you know, even though it's old and derelict, clean it up. Also, the other things you want to clean up, lock nut here, I don't know if you can see it there, and your lock washer if you got one, and your thrust washer. Alright, before I go get the seals, another couple things I forgot to mention. Your dust cap. You get the paper towel and just clean all that crap out of the dust cap, because you don't want all that in there at all. And now if you got a rubber cap like mine, I recommend cleaning the dust cap. If you got a rubber cap like mine, just take your time and come on, pop this sucker out, because solvents can attack that little rubber plug. So keep that guy safe. And then same thing, take it in your younger brother's or older brother's toothbrush and clean that guy out. And same thing goes. There we go. Same thing goes with the hub. Just once again, this guy here, drop it in there, clean it up. Same kind of way that you did with everything else. Once again, make sure you wipe all the grease out with a paper towel before you get started. Alright, I'll be back in a while after I get the seals. Alright, so I'm back from getting the new wheel seals. Now it's time to basically hose everything off with compressed air. So, first thing is, if you don't have compressed air, you have to use brake and parts cleaner, because it's very volatile. It'll evaporate very quickly. So, but if you don't want to do that, then just make sure you get in everywhere, because if you have any solvent in there whatsoever, it'll break down the grease, and that'll get into your bearings and destroy your bearings. So it's absolutely imperative that you get all the solvent out of there. So while you're at it, just wipe everything out with a paper towel every once in a while. Just make sure that everything's clean. Now, once you're done, if you've finished wiping everything out, do one last blast with compressed air, just to kind of get rid of all the little chunks of paper towel everywhere. So now that's done, we're going to move on to the bearings. Now the bearings are a little bit different, because what people like to do is they like to take their blower and blow air at it this way, and that'll cause the bearing to spin. Now this is very bad, because that bearing can get up to some very high speeds, and with no lubrication it'll just fly apart. So do not do that. So instead what we do is we take the air nozzle and we blow in between the race and the cage here until all the crud is out of the bearing. So same thing. It's okay to do it like this, but as long as you hold the cage in place so that the bearing doesn't spin. But more preferable is either go from this end or that end, or even both for that matter. Now just let me say, this is a mess.